I'm Alex, 28 years old, and if you asked my family to describe me, you'd probably get a chorus of sighs, dismissive chuckles, and a few half-hearted attempts to change the subject. I was always the quiet one, the dreamer that does even have a job guy. And for most of my life, I let them say whatever they wanted, kept my head down, and focused on building something they'd never understand. But this year's family reunion? That's the day everything changed, though they didn't know it when I walked in. Every July, our extended family gathers at my Aunt Melinda's country estate for what they like to call a reunion, but what has always felt more like a performance. A show where everyone competes to see who's the most successful, who's raising the brightest kids, who bought the newest car, who married best. I stopped going for a while. 3 years, to be exact. But this year I showed up. On time. Alone. Wearing a navy blazer and jeans. Casual but clean. Neutral. Unthreatening. Just the way they like to remember me. As soon as I stepped onto the stone pathway leading to the back patio, I heard it. Laughter. The clink of wine glasses. That over-rehearsed tone people use when they want to sound important. The voices pulled me in like a trap I already knew too well. I scanned the crowd for a familiar face and locked eyes with my dad first. His reaction was almost comical. A blink of surprise, a raised eyebrow, and then that tight, practiced smile I've seen since I was a kid. The one that says, "Oh, you're still around?" He waved me over with the same tone he might use to summon the waiter at a steakhouse. "There he is," he announced to the group like I was the late arrival to a charity gala. "Our wandering philosopher has returned." People chuckled, especially my Uncle Greg, who's always been the unofficial MC of these things, always narrating everyone's life like he's hosting a game show. I gave a polite smile and nodded to the group. I wasn't going to bite yet. Not until I had to. My sister, Veronica, walked over holding a wine glass with her usual smirk, the kind of smirk that survived 2 divorces, 1 failed law firm, and a TikTok-famous teenage daughter she can't control. "Look at you," she said, eyeing my clothes. "At least you showed up without asking for money this time." I laughed softly. "Nice to see you too, Veronica." We made small talk, about the weather, about her kids, about nothing really, until dinner started being served. We sat around the enormous outdoor table draped in white linen, surrounded by ivy-covered trellises and pretentious centerpieces. Everyone had their assigned seats. I was next to my cousin Brandon, who spent half the meal bragging about the startup job he landed thanks to Uncle Greg, and across from me sat my parents, my dad nursing a scotch, while my mom tapped her phone under the table, scrolling Instagram like she couldn't care less. The moment I'd been waiting for arrived during dessert. My dad stood up, tapping his spoon against his wine glass. "Let's make a toast," he said, the way he always does after a couple drinks. He gestured dramatically around the table. "To family, to success, and to those of us who worked hard, made something of ourselves, and didn't just float through life." He paused and looked directly at me. "Let's toast to the kid who still hasn't done anything worth mentioning." A wave of silence rippled across the table, followed by a few forced chuckles. My throat tightened, but I kept my expression calm. My mom didn't even look up. Veronica leaned in and added with her signature sneer, "At least he showed up without asking for money this time." It was the kind of moment that could have broken me 5 years ago. Back then, I would have swallowed the lump in my throat, excused myself, and left early, driving home with my fists clenched and my stomach churning. But not this time. I didn't flinch. I just laughed. A slow, genuine laugh. Not loud, not dramatic, just amused. And then I reached for the buttons on my jacket. That was the moment. The shift. The crack in the atmosphere, like the air itself was holding its breath. I undid the top button, then the second, and slowly pulled the lapels apart to reveal the black and silver logo on my chest. A simple, clean emblem. The emblem of Morningside Systems. At first, no one said anything, because most of them didn't recognize it. Not right away, but Veronica did. Her eyes widened. Her glass slipped slightly in her hand. Brandon stared for a second, then choked on his wine. Uncle Greg squinted. "Is that? Wait. And my dad?" He blinked. Once. Twice. Then leaned forward with a scowl. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" I looked at him. "I closed on the acquisition last week. Full buyout. Morningside Systems is mine now." Brandon's fork hit the plate. Veronica's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I didn't want to say anything," I added calmly. Because I figured today was about family, not business. But since we're making toasts. And then I stopped. Let the silence stretch. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from the quiet thrill of finally getting to flip the script. The company they all work for. The one Uncle Greg manages operations for. The one Veronica has a cushy PR job in. The one Brandon brags about nonstop. And the one my dad retired from, riding on connections and handshakes and nepotism. They didn't know. Not until now. And I hadn't even told them the rest. Not yet. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. No one knew what to say, or maybe they just didn't know what version of themselves to be. I watched the realization ripple across each of their faces like a slow, creeping tide. For years, I'd been the one they laughed at, the one they whispered about in kitchens and car rides home. I'd walked out of college to chase an unrealistic dream, and to them, that made me a punchline. And now, here I was, sitting at the same table, in the same chair they always made me feel small in, wearing the future on my chest. My father's voice finally broke the silence. "You expect us to believe you bought Morningside?" He scoffed, eyes narrowing. The same look he used to give me when I came home with scraped knees or late report cards. "You couldn't afford a used car 2 years ago." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I expected. "You're right," I said, my voice calm. 2 years ago, I couldn't. But that's when my third app got acquired. Things changed after that. He stared at me like I was speaking another language. My mom finally looked up from her phone, her brow slightly furrowed, like she was just tuning into a movie halfway through and didn't like the plot twist. "You wrote code?" My cousin Brandon muttered, still not fully grasping it. "But weren't you delivering groceries or something?" "Sure," I replied, in between coding sessions and investor pitches. I didn't have rent help or family connections. I had to hustle. My sister snorted, reaching for her wine. "So you got lucky. That's not the same as earning it." "Funny," I said, tilting my head, because the board I just replaced seems to disagree. That one hit hard. I could practically feel the tension thicken around the table. Brandon looked like he'd been slapped. My Uncle Greg cleared his throat and leaned forward. "You didn't seriously buy controlling shares," he said, trying to sound casual. "That's not how this works. You need backing, boards, stakeholders. That takes years." "It does," I said with a shrug. "Took me 5. But when your CTO leaks internal inefficiencies and you're already planning a competing platform, things move faster than you'd think. Especially when your product outperforms theirs and you use your leverage to convince the shareholders it's time for a change." My mom blinked. "You mean you started your own company?" "I did. And I merged it with Morningside last week." They didn't even know who was behind the buyout until the contracts were signed. Pretty clean, really. Greg was turning red now. "That company is our legacy." "No," I said, leaning in. "It was your playground. You passed around positions like party favors. Meanwhile, the people doing the real work, the engineers, the interns, the developers, got ignored. That ends now." I could see my dad's jaw tighten. That simmering, quiet rage he always tried to keep just below the surface when he didn't have control over a conversation. "So what now?" he asked. "You come here to gloat?" "No," I said, pausing. "I came because you invited me. I wasn't planning on saying anything. But you started it, like you always do." Veronica slammed her glass down. "You think this makes you better than us?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked around the table, at the people who had mocked me, underestimated me, used me for years as a living example of what not to become. All because I hadn't followed their version of success. "I don't think I'm better," I said finally. "I think I worked harder. I think I built something while you were busy pretending I didn't matter. And now, I get to decide how this company runs, and who gets to stay in it." The silence that followed was different this time. Not shocked, but scared. Brandon's expression shifted from confusion to panic. Veronica's smirk disappeared. And Uncle Greg, usually so loud and performative, suddenly looked very, very still. "Wait," my mom said, her voice tight. "You wouldn't. You're not going to fire your own family." I looked at her for a long moment. "You're assuming I still consider you family." And that was when Brandon stood up, knocking over his chair. "You can't do this. I've worked there for 3 years. I know people. They'll never let you get away with." "Brandon," I interrupted, still seated, still calm. "You were a diversity hire Greg pushed through HR without credentials. I've seen the reports. You've missed 16 deadlines in the last year. I didn't have to do anything. The system you all created, the one built on favors instead of merit, is collapsing under its own weight." He looked like he might cry. Good. Across from me, my dad's hands clenched the tablecloth. "You come into my house." "No," I cut him off again. "You invited me to a reunion. You raised a glass and toasted to my failure. I just brought the facts." I slowly stood up, brushing the jacket back over the logo as I straightened. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I said, "but I am here to make one thing clear. You don't get to define me anymore. Not with your toasts, not with your silence, not with your smug little jokes." And then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Not thick, not flashy, just paper. I laid it gently on the center of the table and tapped it once. Greg eyed it. "What's that?" "A courtesy," I said. "Inside are preliminary transition memos, departmental reviews, new leadership structures. You'll want to read them closely." I turned to walk away. And just before I reached the edge of the patio, I heard my dad's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it before. "You think you're the big man now? You'll always be that boy who couldn't make the team. You'll always be." I stopped walking. I didn't turn around. I just said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Then it must be killing you to realize your job depends on that boy now." And I kept walking. I didn't look back as I walked down the driveway, past the row of polished cars they'd all parked like trophies. Dad's obnoxious red convertible, Veronica's leased SUV with the vanity plate, Greg's ridiculous black truck that had never once seen a construction site. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes in a rhythm that matched my pulse, steady but alive. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't walking away in shame or silence. I was walking away in full control. By the time I reached my rental car, a plain black sedan I'd chosen on purpose, something neutral, forgettable, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, then a dozen more times. I didn't even need to check who it was. I slid the phone into the console and sat for a minute with the engine off, just letting the air settle. The sun had begun to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the road. I stared straight ahead, not smiling, not angry, just still. It was surreal, in a way. That house, that table, those people. For so long, they had felt like the center of the universe. Like their opinions defined my worth. Their approval, or lack of it, was oxygen. And for years, I'd been gasping. But now I realized they were just noise. Background static in a life I'd already built without them. Still, I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't over. I knew what that envelope would set in motion. Sure enough, when I finally checked my phone, the messages were pouring in. "Dad, what is this supposed to mean?" "Greg, you're bluffing. We'll talk Monday." "Brandon, you wouldn't actually fire me, right? I can fix this. Whatever it is." "Mom, please call me. Your father is furious. Don't do something you'll regret." "Veronica, wow. Real mature, Alex. You know what? You've always been jealous. You just found a way to play dirty." I let the screen dim. No response. Not yet. Let them sit in it. The next morning, the real panic began. I timed it perfectly. My legal team sent the formal restructure notices at 9:01 a.m. Department heads were informed of new reporting lines. Executive review audits were triggered, not by me personally, but by the internal oversight panel I'd installed during the merger. A few of the names on the audit list were, unsurprisingly, sitting at that reunion table the night before. By 10:15, Greg had emailed me directly. A full-page rant about betrayal, family legacy, and crossing lines. I skimmed it, flagged it for my legal team, and archived it. At 11:02, HR forwarded me a resignation letter from Veronica. It was short. No apology. Just a calculated exit. The kind someone sends when they think they can beat you to the punch. By noon, my mom had called 4 times. I didn't pick up. She tried texting instead. "Whatever you think you're doing, just remember we're your family. This company is all we have." I stared at that message for a while. All we have. Funny how they'd never considered me part of that equation until now. Until I had the power to take it away. But it wasn't about revenge. Not really. I wasn't trying to humiliate them, at least not at first. I was just trying to hold them accountable. I gave them something they never gave me, the benefit of the doubt, a chance to act with dignity. They didn't take it. And so, things escalated. On Wednesday, Brandon showed up unannounced at my office building. He didn't make it past the front desk. My assistant called ahead to ask if I wanted to let him up. I said no, but I watched the security footage later. He looked lost, like a kid who'd lost his mom in the grocery store. On Thursday, Uncle Greg scheduled a shareholder emergency meeting. He tried to challenge the merger, tried to rally the old board against me. He failed. Every document had been airtight. Every vote accounted for. Every move backed by performance metrics that made the old regime look lazy, outdated, and incompetent. They didn't just lose. They watched themselves lose. And then, on Friday morning, I got a call from my dad. He hadn't called in years. Not even when I was in the hospital with a collapsed lung 2 years ago. Not when I launched my first app. Not when I moved cities or changed numbers. Not when I won the innovation grant that got me national press. But now he needed something. I let the phone ring until voicemail picked up. He didn't leave one. But 20 minutes later, I got a message. It wasn't a paragraph. It wasn't even a sentence. Just 2 words. Let's talk. No punctuation. No warmth. It was like a man trying to put out a fire without admitting he ever lit the match. I didn't respond. Not right away. I needed to think. Because part of me, the kid who used to sit outside his office door waiting to be noticed, still wanted him to say more. Still wanted to hear, just once, "I'm proud of you." But another part of me, the man I'd become, knew better. This wasn't pride. This was fear. Because for the first time in his life, I was the one holding the door. And he didn't know if I was going to open it. I waited 3 days before calling him back. Not because I was trying to be dramatic. Though, I'll admit, the silence probably got under his skin, but because I needed to be sure. I had spent years craving his approval, begging for scraps of validation. I needed to know that when I finally spoke to him again, it wasn't from that same place of need. I had to be done with all that. So on Monday morning, I called. He picked up on the first ring. "Hello." His voice sounded cautious, like he was testing the air. "It's me," I said simply. There was a pause. Then he cleared his throat. "I didn't think you'd call back." "I wasn't sure I would," I replied. "But you wanted to talk." He exhaled slowly, like he was buying time. Then he dove right in. "Look, Alex, I know things got a little out of hand at the reunion. I probably shouldn't have made that joke. Or said what I said. Probably, I thought. Not exactly an apology. And I didn't know about the merger," he went on. "I didn't know what you'd been building. We were surprised." I said nothing. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, we were wrong about you," he said finally. "I was wrong." I waited for the usual follow-up, the "but" that always came next. "But you should have told us. But you didn't have to embarrass us. But you've changed." But it never came. It was strange. Without the "but," his words felt weightless. Like they weren't tethered to any real remorse. Just floating, waiting to be accepted. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, keeping my tone flat. "But I wasn't looking for an apology. I just wanted you to see me clearly." "Is that what all this was?" he asked. "Some kind of power move?" "No," I said. "This was me doing what you never thought I could. Or should." He didn't respond. After a beat, he said, "You know your Uncle Greg's trying to get the board to overturn the restructuring. He thinks you're being vindictive." I laughed. "Greg's lucky I didn't fire him outright." "He's panicking," my dad admitted. "They all are. HR reports, audits. They don't know what to do." "They do now," I replied. "They just don't like that it's not them making the rules anymore." Silence again. Then, softly, he asked, "So, where does that leave me?" I stared out the window. My office overlooked the city skyline, sun breaking through the clouds, catching on the glass towers. It looked nothing like the world I grew up in. It looked like mine. "You're retired," I said, "and nothing's changed there. But if I wanted to come back in some capacity—" "No," I said, cutting him off. "You won't be coming back." His voice hardened. "You're really going to shut me out?" "No. You shut me out. For years. And now you're just living with the consequences." He let out a bitter laugh. "So this is revenge?" "No," I said. "This is me protecting what I built. The way you protected your image, your circle, your comfort, at my expense. You all made your choices. You toasted to my failure. You humiliated me at every opportunity. And now, I'm just drawing the line." There was another long pause. "You're making a mistake, Alex." I smiled. I've heard that before. And I ended the call. After that, things moved quickly. Veronica's resignation was accepted, and not gracefully. She tried to walk out with 2 company laptops and a Rolodex of contacts she didn't realize had already been flagged for deletion. Greg tried to undermine one of the transition teams, and was quietly removed from his position by the oversight committee I had empowered. Brandon, HR offered him a performance improvement plan, but he walked out instead. His email account was disabled within the hour. I didn't take joy in any of it. That's the part people misunderstand. This wasn't about some movie-style vengeance. I wasn't rubbing my hands together, waiting to gloat. It was just necessary, like cauterizing a wound. You don't do it because you enjoy it. You do it so the rest of the body doesn't rot. In the weeks that followed, things finally started to settle. The company, freed from the clutches of nepotism and backroom deals, began to thrive. Teams were more motivated. Managers were more accountable. Even the junior staff, the ones who had always been overlooked, started stepping up in ways I hadn't anticipated. I held one-on-one meetings with every department head. I listened. I implemented suggestions. I made sure no one ever felt like I had, voiceless in a room full of people pretending to care. And then, one afternoon, something strange happened. I got a letter in the mail. A real letter. Handwritten. Neat cursive on thick cream paper. No return address, just my name on the front. I opened it slowly. It was from my mom. Alex, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't expect a reply. I just want you to know something I should have said a long time ago. I was silent for too many years. When your father mocked you, I looked away. When your sister belittled you, I said nothing. I told myself I was staying out of it, but really, I was just a coward. You didn't deserve that. You never did. I hope one day you can forgive me. Or at least know that I see you now. Fully. Proudly. Your mother. I sat there for a long time, the letter resting in my lap, the words sinking in like slow rain. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. It didn't erase everything. It didn't fix the years I'd spent carrying their disappointment like a second skin. But it mattered. In a quiet, unexpected way, it mattered. And maybe that was enough. Months passed. The reunion photos faded from everyone's social media. The whispers stopped. My name stopped being the punchline. Instead, it became the header of the internal newsletter, the name on the new corporate letterhead, the one interns spoke about with curiosity, the one competitors took seriously. Sometimes, when I'm in the elevator or grabbing coffee in the lobby, someone will stop me, an employee, a client, even a former exec, and say, "You're Alex, right? The new guy who turned everything around." I smile. "Not new," I say. "Just finally seen." And as for the next family reunion, let's just say the invitation came in the mail. I RSVP'd no, and sent a donation to the event caterer instead, anonymously, of course. Because even when you're done with the past, it doesn't hurt to leave a little reminder of who you've become. The kind of reminder they can't toast over. The kind they'll never forget.